What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, a country smaller than half of California is experiencing the fastest economic transformation in human history? Not in decades, not in years, but right now. A nation once overlooked, once whispered about in travel circles for its untamed rainforests, has exploded onto the world stage with a force so powerful that economists are scrambling to rewrite their textbooks. This is Guyana, and what's happening here isn't just remarkable, it's unprecedented. In the past 4 years alone, Guyana's economy hasn't just grown, it has tripled. Let that sink in for a moment. While most nations celebrate 3% growth, Guyana has been averaging 47% annually since 2022. 47%. The International Monetary Fund has officially declared it the fastest growing economy on planet Earth. In 2024, their GDP surged by a staggering 43.6% in a single year, driven by something the world desperately needs: oil. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. This isn't just an oil story. This is a story about a nation that discovered black gold and decided to do something different, something smarter. Picture this. 5 years ago, Guyana was producing exactly 0 barrels of oil per day. 0. Today, they're pumping out 645,000 barrels daily, making them the third largest per capita petroleum producer in the entire world. By 2027, that number is projected to skyrocket to 1.3 million barrels per day. To put this in perspective, they increased production by an average of 98,000 barrels per day every single year from 2020 to 2023, ranking them as the third fastest growing non-OPEC producing country during that period. And the crown jewel, the Stabroek Block offshore operated by ExxonMobil, contains over 11 billion barrels of recoverable oil resources. That's not a typo. 11 billion barrels. But before you think this is just another petrostate about to squander its windfall, let me stop you right there. Because what makes Guyana's story absolutely electrifying is what they're doing with this newfound wealth. They're not building golden palaces. They're not creating vanity projects. They're systematically transforming their entire nation through the most ambitious infrastructure revolution South America has ever witnessed. And the projects they're undertaking, they're nothing short of breathtaking. Let me paint you a picture of what's actually happening on the ground. Imagine you're standing in Georgetown, Guyana's capital, in 2019. The roads connecting the coastline to the hinterlands are rough, often impassable during rainy seasons. Bridges are few and far between. Now fast forward to 2022. In just that single year, the government constructed over 180 bridges and approximately 1,651 kilometers of roads. 1 year, 180 bridges. But they didn't stop there. By the end of 2022, 351 bridges had been erected countrywide. And from 2020 to 2022, more than 3,670 kilometers of roads were built and maintained. That's the distance from New York to Los Angeles, built in just 3 years in a country with fewer than 800,000 people. And the budget allocations, they tell a story of ambition that borders on audacity. In 2019, Guyana allocated $11.8 billion for roads and bridges. Significant, yes, but watch what happens next. The 2023 budget, $131.5 billion. That's more than a tenfold increase in just 4 years. Housing development funding rose from less than $1 billion in 2019 to $53.1 billion in 2023. These aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. These are dirt paths transforming into modern highways. These are communities once isolated now connected. These are lives fundamentally changed. Now, here's where Guyana's strategy reveals its true genius. While other oil-rich nations have fallen victim to what economists call the Dutch disease, where resource wealth actually damages other sectors of the economy, Guyana is doing something revolutionary. They're investing heavily in renewable energy. Yes, You read that right. An oil boom nation is simultaneously becoming a clean energy powerhouse. And they're not doing it for optics. They're doing it because they understand something crucial. Oil won't last forever, but rivers will. Enter the hydroelectric revolution. Guyana is blessed with abundant water resources, and they're harnessing them with surgical precision. The Moko Moko hydropower station in southern Rupununi has been generating 2.2 megawatts since 1999, quietly providing clean energy to local communities for over 2 decades. But that was just the beginning. The Kaieteur hydroelectric project is now being developed to utilize one of the world's most powerful waterfalls, Kaieteur Falls, which has a single drop of 741 feet, nearly 5 times the height of Niagara Falls. This isn't just about generating electricity. It's about capturing the raw, untamed power of nature and converting it into sustainable energy that will power Guyana's future long after the oil wells run dry. But they're not stopping there. The government is eyeing 2 more massive hydropower plants. The Amaila Falls project alone could produce 165 megawatts, enough to significantly shift the nation away from fossil fuel dependency, despite the massive oil reserves sitting offshore. Think about that contradiction for a moment. They're sitting on 11 billion barrels of oil, yet they're investing hundreds of millions into hydroelectric power. That's not contradiction. That's vision. The Curabrang River hydroelectric project in the Pataro-Siparuni region adds even more potential to this renewable energy portfolio. These aren't just power plants. They're insurance policies against an uncertain energy future and powerful statements to the world that Guyana understands the assignment. Now, let's talk about connectivity, because you can have all the resources in the world, but if you can't move people and goods efficiently, you're stuck. Guyana recognized this, and their response has been nothing short of transformative. Ogle International Airport, once a modest domestic airstrip, underwent a metamorphosis that perfectly encapsulates Guyana's ambitions. In 2007, it transformed into a full-fledged international airport complete with customs, immigration, air traffic control, and firefighting services. By 2009, it gained Port of Entry certification and showcased a brand new 2,000-foot Class 1A concrete runway. But the expansion didn't stop. Fast forward to 2019, and a $70 million helicopter taxiway was added specifically for the booming oil and gas industry. And right now, under construction, is a $50 million AC Marriott hotel on Airport Road, expected to generate 400 jobs by late 2024. But here's the strategic brilliance. By increasing flight capacity and improving infrastructure, they're not just moving oil workers. They're attracting airlines, adventure seekers, and eco-tourists. They're positioning Guyana as the gateway to South America's last frontier, accessible, modern, yet utterly wild. Every flight that lands brings not just passengers, but opportunities, investments, and connections to the global economy. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Remember how I mentioned Guyana's Natural Resource Fund? This is where their wisdom truly shines. Established in 2019, before the first commercial barrel of oil was even extracted, this sovereign wealth fund is essentially Guyana's piggy bank for the future. And it's growing at a pace that would make Norway's legendary oil fund jealous. As of early 2025, the fund has accumulated over $3.1 billion, representing over 12.5% of their GDP. In 2024 alone, they added $1.1 billion. But here's the kicker. They're not just hoarding this money. They have a formula-based withdrawal system tied to non-oil GDP growth, with parliamentary approval required for withdrawals above certain thresholds. This isn't politicians with a blank check. This is institutional discipline designed to prevent the resource curse that has devastated so many nations. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, the fund received $605.5 million in oil revenues from 7 profit oil payments and 1 royalty payment. Under their production sharing agreement with ExxonMobil, Guyana receives a 2% share of oil sold and a 12.5% profit share after expenses. Some critics argue these terms are too favorable to ExxonMobil, but here's the reality. Those unfavorable terms have already generated billions in revenue and funded the largest infrastructure transformation in South American history. The proof, as they say, is in the pudding. But wait, there's more. And this is where Guyana's ambitions reach almost science fiction levels of audacity. They're building an artificial island, not a small one, not a symbolic one, a 44-acre artificial island off their coastline, tied to the mainland by a road, designed to serve as a massive industrial hub for the oil and gas sector and beyond. The project, led by Belgian company Jan de Nul together with partners on behalf of ExxonMobil, clinched a $300 million deal spanning 2 decades. The journey began in June 2022 with massive dredging efforts, crafting new channels and expanding existing nautical pathways. Phase 1 was completed in December 2023. Phase 2 will conclude by April 2024, creating a seamless integration with existing port facilities. This isn't just about solving land scarcity, though that's certainly part of it. This is about creating a purpose-built, state-of-the-art logistics hub that can handle the most demanding operations for one of the world's fastest-growing oil sectors. It's about taking a problem, land scarcity, and turning it into an opportunity, a brand new island specifically designed for 21st century industry. When you think about it, they're literally expanding their country. That's not just ambitious, that's visionary. Now, I want you to pause for just a moment, because what I'm about to share with you is perhaps the most critical development in Guyana's entire transformation. It's a project that could reshape not just Guyana, but trade patterns across an entire continent. I'm talking about the Deepwater port development in Berbice, on Guyana's eastern coast. And this isn't just any port. This is a game-changer that has international engineering giant Bechtel Corporation involved in its development, with the project holding what President Irfan Ali describes as national, regional, and hemispheric importance. Here's why this matters so much. Currently, cargo from northern Brazil that needs to reach Atlantic markets has to either travel thousands of miles around the continent or use expensive and time-consuming overland routes. But imagine if there was a deepwater port on Guyana's coast, connected by a new highway directly to Brazil's northern border, capable of handling Panamax-class vessels, the largest ships that can transit the Panama Canal. Suddenly, Brazilian exports could reach global markets through Guyana in a fraction of the time and cost. Vice President Barrett Jagdeo has stated that this port could cut shipping costs by up to 60%. 60%. That's not an incremental improvement. That's a revolution in logistics. The Berbice Deepwater Port project is expected to cost around $285 million and will be primarily privately financed by major shipping companies like Munishwars Limited and John Fernandez Limited through their joint venture, Cranes Guyana Incorporated. These companies are in advanced discussions with financial institutions to secure funding, and once agreements are signed with the government, they expect to have the first berths operational within 18 months. 18 months from signing to operational berths. That's the kind of timeline that demonstrates both urgency and capability. The port will be strategically positioned to handle large cargo ships, support the thriving oil and gas industry, and handle agricultural exports, especially rice and sugarcane, which are major products from the Berbice region. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This port isn't just about Guyana. This port could position Guyana as a regional trade hub for the entire Caribbean and northern South America. Goods could be imported through Guyana and re-exported throughout the region. The economic multiplier effects are almost impossible to calculate because nothing like this has existed before in this part of the world. Its infrastructure creating entirely new trade patterns and economic relationships. And the government is so committed to this that they're simultaneously constructing a new highway from the coast to the Brazil border, with funding from the United Kingdom, ensuring that once the port is operational, the land connections will already be in place. Before we continue, I need you to do something for me. If you're finding this story as mind-blowing as I am, if you're sitting there thinking, how have I not heard about this before? Then I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. We're on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers, and your subscription helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. Stories about nations and projects that are reshaping our world in real time. And here's what I really want to know from you. Which of these mega projects do you think will have the biggest impact on Guyana's future? Is it the oil production that's funding everything? The hydroelectric project securing energy independence? The artificial island pushing technological boundaries? Or the Deepwater port that could reshape continental trade? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Because these aren't just construction projects. These are bets on different visions of the future, and your perspective matters. So subscribe, comment, and let's continue this journey together. Now, where was I? Right, we were talking about trade and ports, but let's shift gears entirely and talk about something that might surprise you. Guyana is simultaneously positioning itself as a global leader in ecotourism and environmental conservation. Yes, the same country producing over 600,000 barrels of oil daily is also being recognized as the #1 best ecotourism destination in the world at the Sustainable Top 100 Destination Awards in Berlin. How is that possible? How does a nation balance massive oil extraction with environmental leadership? The answer reveals a sophistication in Guyana's strategy that most people completely miss. Here's the secret. Guyana understands that their greatest asset isn't just what's beneath the ocean floor. It's also what covers 80% of their land surface. Pristine, largely untouched tropical rainforest. These aren't just forests. These are some of the last remaining unspoiled rainforests on the entire continent, teeming with biodiversity that scientists are still cataloging. And Guyana has made a calculated decision that these forests are worth more standing than cut down. They've established protected areas like Kaieteur National Park, home to that spectacular 741-foot waterfall I mentioned earlier, Iwakrama Forest, Kanuku Mountains, and Shell Beach. These aren't token gestures. These are serious conservation commitments backed by both law and resources. The Iwakrama International Center for Rainforest Conservation and Development operates in the Iwakrama Forest, where research, sustainable forestry, and ecotourism blend seamlessly. They're proving something revolutionary, that you can generate economic value from rainforests without destroying them. Imagine that. But it goes deeper. Indigenous communities have embraced ecotourism as a way to share not just the beauty of their land but the richness of their cultural heritage. These communities are actively involved in conservation efforts, creating a model where traditional knowledge and modern conservation science work hand in hand. The Guyana Tourism Authority has established a Green Tourism Certification Program, a badge of honor for eco-conscious travelers and businesses that meet rigorous environmental standards. And the results speak for themselves. Guyana's rich avian diversity attracts birdwatchers from around the world. Wildlife enthusiasts come to spot jaguars, giant river otters, and harpy eagles in their natural habitats. Adventure travelers trek through pristine rainforests and kayak down wild rivers. And every dollar spent by these tourists supports both conservation efforts and local communities, creating a self-reinforcing cycle where ecotourism funds conservation, which enhances ecotourism's appeal, which brings more tourists, which funds more conservation. It's an elegant solution to a problem that has stumped countless nations: how to profit from nature without destroying it. Now let's talk about agriculture, because while oil grabs the headlines, agriculture remains absolutely fundamental to Guyana's economy and identity. The sector contributes about 1/3 of GDP and employs 30% of the workforce. Traditional industries like sugar and rice remain important, but here's what's exciting. Agro-processing exports have doubled over the last 5 years. Doubled. Small and medium-sized Guyanese agro-processors have been enhancing their products, introducing innovation, and improving packaging to compete in international markets. Notable additions include products like Instant Cook-Up by Taz Foods, bringing traditional Guyanese cuisine to international consumers in convenient formats. Pepper Pot in a Box by Ashtal's, transforming a beloved local dish into an exportable product. Only Coconut by Precision Global, tapping into the global demand for coconut-based products. These might sound like small potatoes compared to billion-dollar oil projects, but they represent something crucial: economic diversification. They represent Guyanese entrepreneurs seeing opportunity and seizing it. They represent a food processing sector that's becoming increasingly sophisticated and export-oriented. But Guyana isn't stopping at traditional agro-processing. They're practically modernizing their entire agricultural sector with precision agricultural technologies. We're talking satellites, drones, and data analytics being deployed to boost crop yields. They're investing in seed improvement and genetic modification for better crop quality and productivity. These efforts aren't just about growing more food, though that's certainly important. They're about decreasing import dependency, ensuring a local high-quality food supply, and generating rural employment. In a nation that could easily become completely dependent on oil revenues, agriculture serves as an anchor to economic diversity and food security. And Guyana has positioned itself as a legitimate contender in global agriculture, promoting sustainability and resilience even as oil billions pour into government coffers. Let's zoom out for a moment and talk about what all of this means, because the numbers tell a story that's almost hard to believe. In 2025, Guyana is projected to have a GDP per capita of over $94,000 in purchasing power parity terms. Let me repeat that, $94,000 per capita. That's not just the highest in South America. That rivals some of the wealthiest nations in Europe. In December 2024, Guyana became the third largest per capita petroleum producing country in the world. The third largest, from zero to third place in just 5 years. The IMF projects that Guyana's economy will grow by an average of 14% per year over the next 5 years, driven by robust oil production and strong non-oil GDP growth. Even the non-oil sectors are expected to grow at 6.75% annually over the medium term, about 3 percentage points higher than the pre-oil decade average. This is comprehensive economic transformation. The country's natural resource fund is accumulating wealth at a pace that ensures future generations will benefit from today's oil boom. Gross international reserves have surpassed $1 billion. The current account surplus reached 24.5% of GDP in 2024, more than doubling from the previous year. But here's what really matters. The non-oil economy grew over 13% in 2024, reflecting solid broad-based performance across sectors. Construction, services, agriculture, all of them are experiencing robust growth. This is not Dutch disease. This is not a resource curse. This is a nation that discovered immense wealth and is deploying it strategically across multiple sectors to build a genuinely diversified, resilient economy. Inflation remains remarkably moderate at around 3 to 4% despite all this growth and massive government spending. That's almost miraculous when you consider the scale of economic transformation underway. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't address the challenges, because no story of transformation is without obstacles and risks. Guyana faces very real concerns about environmental preservation. How do you balance massive oil extraction with rainforest conservation? It's a tightrope walk that requires constant vigilance. There are concerns about ensuring that the benefits of these mega projects are shared equitably among citizens. Oil wealth has a nasty habit of concentrating in the hands of elites, and while Guyana has implemented institutional checks through their Natural Resource Fund and parliamentary oversight, vigilance is essential. Guyana is at high risk from climate-related hazards. The impact of rising sea levels and intensified storm surges could expose 100% of the country's coastal agriculture and 66.4% of coastal urban areas to flooding and coastal erosion, with potential GDP losses projected to exceed 46.4%. That's not a distant theoretical threat. That's a clear and present danger to the very coastline where most of Guyana's population lives and works. Flooding from rainfall routinely affects residents during the 2 rainy seasons each year, and the economic impacts are forecast to increase by around 60% by mid-century due to climate change. There are absorptive capacity limitations. Guyana's public sector, while improving rapidly, has constraints that limit how effectively they can deploy sudden revenue increases. You can't just throw money at problems. You need skilled people, functioning institutions, and time to plan and execute properly. There are risks of economic overheating. If the economy grows too fast, if too much money chases too few goods and services, inflation could spike, eroding the gains that ordinary Guyanese should be experiencing. The IMF has cautioned that while inflation is currently moderate, it could rise if overheating pressures aren't contained. And there's the existential question. What happens when the oil runs out? Even with 11 billion barrels of recoverable resources, oil is a finite resource. Production will peak, probably in the 2030s, and then begin to decline. The question is whether Guyana will have used this window of extraordinary wealth to build alternative economic engines that can sustain prosperity after the oil age ends. That's the test. That's the challenge. And based on their investments in hydroelectric power, infrastructure, agriculture, tourism, and education, there are reasons for optimism. But it's not guaranteed. Nothing ever is. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Guyana's mega projects. If you found this as fascinating as I did researching it, make sure you've subscribed to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our coverage of the world's most ambitious projects. Share this video with anyone who loves stories about transformation of Guyana.